And we've enabled our transcript so that people can view closed captioning and view the transcript. Within the next 24 to 48 hours, this class will be loaded to the Michael's YouTube page. So you'll be able to go find it there. You might consider subscribing to the Michael's YouTube page so you don't ever miss out on our class recordings. Also, if you're making the project along with us today, which I hope you are, don't forget to tag Michael's in your hashtags. Use hashtag Make It With Michael's and hashtag Michael's classes and sharing pictures of your artwork and your jewelry on social media. And also during class today, you can interact with the instructor and the moderators using the Zoom chat function, which it looks like we've got a lot of people figuring out. Zoom is already, chat is active already. If you don't want to see chat during class, you can turn it off in the Zoom settings. You can also, if you would like, save the chat at the end of the group. If there's like tips and things coming in, you can save chat. I will put instructions on how to save the chat in the chat as we go throughout the day. If you have any technical issues during the class, put them in the chat. I'm watching it. I will go in and help, and we'll get it all resolved. Let's see. I think that is all I have from the Michael side. We're going to turn our time over to Danielle and we'll get started. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to pin you so that we can.
Hey, thanks so much. Hi, guys. Happy Friday and welcome to our earrings class today. Today, we're going to make a really fun design that it features brick stitch inside of a component. And you can do these in any colors you like. I'll go over the materials with you to show you what size beads I used. But one of the things I was hoping that I could give as the real takeaway from today's class is that you can stitch on the inside of any hoop component. It doesn't even have to be round. It could be like a teardrop shape. Or so what I was going to show you today is a set or a series of stitches. It's like a 4-layer design in brick stitch that you can put inside a component, and you can change it up with bead size. You can change it up with the shape of the component you're using, and there's all different kinds of ways you can make it your own, and you could just kind of, add your own flair to it. So that's my real goal of today's class, is just to equip you with yet another, spark of inspiration to go ahead and look what's in your stash or what inspires you on the findings wall at Michael's. Grab it knowing you can stitch on it and put any colors you want in there and put some sparkly crystal inside. And so that's what the goal of today's class is. And please ask questions if you got them. And I'll just go ahead and walk you through the materials here. I've got everything laid out on the mat. And I was going to explain colors for a second, just because we used a bunch of different colors in our samples. And so let's see if I can switch to my little mat view here. I think I can do it. Oh, there you go. Oh, thank you so much. That's still got it. Thank you. Awesome. So here on the mat, what I've got is I've got the size 10 beading needles and Wildfire. We're always using this beading thread usually and these needles. So that's what I'm going with today. And you can use any color you want. I'm using black today so you guys can see my stitching. And then for the beads, we've got our size 6 and size 8. And so this design has worked with these 2 sizes and in any colors you like. And so for colors, I've got a lot going on here, but the colorways shown here in my hand, those are both in the handout with the Michael's SKUs numbers. So you can go and get those right off the website or in store, and you can use the app, whatever way you shop. All of these numbers are in there. But today I'm going to do what we usually do for Zoom, and I'm going to bring some bright colors in. They're just a little easier to see when we're stitching. A lot of these little light golds might be hard to follow, and the blues tend to blend together like that. So we've got the bright purple and the bright turquoise here. And then for the crystals, you're going to need some 4mm Czech Bicone crystals. And I used, in this design, I used this beautiful like green. It's like a spring green. I'm going to show you guys those really quick. You can use either like a clear finish, which is what I've shown here, but they also come in like an AB finish. AB has that little like sparkle to it. And these are sun catchers, so they're meant to catch the light and reflect it in really neat and cool ways. So go ahead and play with that. Play with any color crystals you want, any colors of seed beads. And again, the ones I used here They're in the handout. So I'm going to switch over really quick to talking about findings. So for findings, as I was saying before, I don't want you to feel like you have to use the same exact finding that I used here, but in case you want to see what they are, what you're seeing on this side are these. And they're just a standard ring. And there's so many components out there like this that I feel like they're a pretty standard staple thing. They measure about 1.25 inches, so 1.25 inches in diameter. And then there's these. They come in all kinds of cool colors. This is another staple, something that a lot of you may have in your stash. You can find them on the findings wall. And this hoop's a little bigger. This hoop comes in at about pushing a 2-inch diameter. And you're going to get a different look, but the stitch is going to work just fine. So we'll show you step by step each one of these rings and how to connect them, and just know that you can do that on any component. And I'll talk a little bit about what I did to get around the tops here. You know, a lot of components are going to have like a little loop at the top. So, and then there's variations, of course. This stitch can also be worked not in the round, but with a turn. And I actually really liked this. Because this hoop was so big, I felt like it just took a lot of beads to get around and a lot of crystals. And so if you wanted to do something that is a little less intensive, you could just do like this and decorate it. And so this stitch will work both in the round joint or with a turn to create it like just a little. So let's jump in. I am going to work on the smaller component for the sake of time because it goes a lot quicker on the 1.25 inch than it does on the 2-inch. And so again, those are the ones you're seeing here. And we're going to start with, you can cut about, let's see, in the handout, I believe I originally had it starting with about 60 inches or so. It's kind of more just like, what is your wingspan? Because keep in mind when you're stitching, you want something that's comfortable, like a length that you can pull through, having to do a bunch of like moving things around. So anything in the way of like an arm span, so 60 inches or so should be fine for length for this. And I'm going to go ahead and just do that. I'm using these Recollections precision scissors. I always use these for Wildfire. They're meant for paper, but for some reason they just do an amazing job on the Wildfire. So little tip there if you're looking for something to cut your Wildfire with. And I think I put those in the handout too. Okay, let's get a beading needle. Again, these are size 10 hard beading needles. They are on the tool wall. And one thing I'm going to grab really quick is some chainless pliers. So the reason I'm going to grab the pliers is to flatten the end of the Wildfire. Makes it really easy to get it through your needle if you do that. You don't want to pull, just give it a press. You'll get a flat little kind of paper thin way to thread your needle. Really clever. And then bring it down about, 7 to 10 inches, fold it over. And let's get started. So let's put this part of this end with the needle, just go ahead and poke that into your mat. Take the end that doesn't have the needle on it. So I'm traveling to get to my end. And go ahead and tie a double knot. It's like a double, just like you're tying your shoes. Double knot onto the ring. Not going through the top loop, we're just tying it onto the ring here. And the tail you'll need on this is about anywhere from 5 to 7 inches. It doesn't need to be too long. You're just going to pull it up through the bead and then kind of put it down another bead to get it out of the way and trim it after we stitch a couple of rows. So there's my double knot right there. And if you want to help it, kind of move it to pull it so that it's facing inside of your hoop. That can give you a little bit of, ease with getting your bead on. And then start with your size 6 seed beads in whatever color you're using. And what we're going to do is just brick stitch around. So I know a lot of you guys are already really knowledgeable with brick stitch. I'm just going to go a little slow for my beginners. So I've got 1 seed bead here. I'm going to bring it down. And something I like to do, so it's just a me thing, but I like to take the tail and put it through that bead. You should be pretty easy with the size 6 bead. So I'm just going to get that in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull my working and tail threads apart. What am I doing here? I'm putting that knot in my seed bead. I'm tightening my knot so that it sits right in there. And that's it. That's all you gotta do. So then you need one more seed bead. And we're going to repeat this all the way around. So go ahead and take that seed bead and bring it down. And then take your needle and go underneath your component. And this is sometimes easier to do on the mat, but when you get fast, you can pick it up and hold it. But for now, I'm just going to show on the mat. I push down from here. And the reason I'm pushing down is I want to keep the seed bead inside while I pull my excess thread through. And it sits there. And then you want to come back up through that bead and go through it from the side that the thread's coming out. Your needle's going over the component now. So we went under it, and now we're coming up around and over the front of it and then through that seed bead. And we're going to do this a bunch of times. So there's that. And when you pull tight, they should sit right next to each other. Now on the first couple, you might need to help it a little, but should sit kind of just like right like that. And each subsequent addition of a seed bead tightens up the one before it. So what I often see is that it's a little loose here, but then as I go, it gets tighter and tighter. So here's another seed bead. And I'm going to go underneath the component here. And then I'm going to push down again. And pull that thread through. That seed bead's going to sit next to the last one, and then just come up through that bead. And again, every time we do this, we're just going to help it sit where we want it to sit for the first few around. Pull tight. And there it is. And so right now, my tail thread, this one right here, I want to get it to get a little bit out of the way. So this is optional, but sometimes I just poke it through the next seed bead and just pull it through. And now it's not going to be catching every time I do my loops on the inside like that. So if it's getting in your way, just give that a try. It sometimes helps a little bit. New bead, under, pushing down a little bit on the mat, and then back up through the bead. And that's all you got to do. That's pretty much it. And this by itself looks really cute, even if you just stopped at this point. But of course, we're going to go and add a lot more rows. But here's a way you can do it while holding it. If you didn't want to do the mat way, you get your thread underneath it and just pinch it. And then just come up. Means you're just using your hands as kind of like a substitute for the mat, just to get it to stay in place. So I'm gonna go a little faster, but please jump in with questions if I lost anybody on starting this. My goal is to get all the way around. This is another one of those designs that, you know, it's fast. So it's one we can demo start to finish. So you get to see like all of it just getting made without any jump aheads. It's really nice. And you can make these really quick for shows. And how cool are these for summer? You can bright colors hanging there on, you know, your display at your craft fair, or, you know, if you're selling your work in a store, you can see it under some sparkly lights. It's really cool. They make a great gift too. And so what I'm doing here is just going around. It's that same process where we're picking up our bead, going under the component, just under. And then if you pull, and then come up over the front of the component, and tighten. And so what I'm seeing here is that, like, once you get this far, once you've got like half of it done, it's not wiggly anymore. But if you needed to move it, and this is kind of handy to know for other types of components that we're not going to join in a round circle. Like, for example, if you were doing this design and you weren't quite, you know, like centered, you can move this row. You can hold it and center it and move it a little bit. So these are movable if you were trying to center something. Just a little handy tip there. Brick stitch can always be slid around. So I'm just picking up bead, going under the component, around the front, through. And if you get little gaps like that, don't be afraid to give it a little more tension. The more you pull, the tighter that will get. And it's getting a little easier to work by hand, meaning like I can hold it and work it versus having it on the mat once I'm about halfway past the midpoint. And it just keeps going. Oops. Or just like kind of fling it there. Sorry, it jumped. And this color, this is not one that was in one of the original sample designs. The color I'm working with is called Groovy Grape. And I can get you guys the SKU number for that if you're loving this color as much as me. I think it's just really bright. And I worked it with yellow crystal in the one that I was kind of just playing around with, but I felt like today we needed to work with a darker crystal color so you could see, but it really pops with yellow next to it. And what I'd recommend doing is like just go to your local Michaels and stand there and hold up all the beads and hold up all the crystals and just play and just see what you like. All right. Almost there. And so what we're going to do here is join this one to the first bead once we get around. But again, on some of the designs, you may not want to join it. You might want to make a turn and start brick stitching back in the other direction. And either of those options is going to work great for this stitch design. All right, get this last one on and then I'll talk about joining it. And I'll talk a little bit about how to feel out the component's top loops. So I've got room for one more bead on here. And it worked out that way on the other one as well. Let me bring that one back over. So on the larger one, it worked out the same way where it was kind of a serendipitous fit with that little 2-inch versus the 1.25. Just took a lot more beads. And when I joined it on a component like this, you have a tiny little hole at the top. I'm trying to make it so you can see. I've got 2 beads, 2 of the 6 beads going through that top hole. That's just how it worked out spacing for me. You'll have to feel that out. You'll have to see, like, does that work for me? Does that stay put? But going through that little, see, this has a little tiny hole at the top. And that's how it ended up working out for me for getting it to space properly. So I just wanted to show that in case anyone's working with this one. On this one, I'm going to put my last stitch maybe just before my hoop. And that's how it works out on this one. It didn't always work out that way on all of them. So like on this one, the beads must have been a little different shape and I ended up with a stitch in my loop there. But on this one, I didn't, or I did actually. It just depends where you are in your stitching and what looks good to you. So you will have to play with it and get the position right. And here's how you can tell. So I got my last bead, I went under the component and pulling it tight. And you'd be able to tell, is it going to look good if I put my thread through the hoop here? If I needed to, I would just come through it and then up. But that's going to make it slant a little bit from the position that I'm in here. So I'm going to just go ahead and join it on the outside of the loop there. And that looks good to me. And I'm going to connect these. So here's how to connect the first one and the one we just ended with. So you want to come down through that first bead. And oops, sorry about that. Come down through the first bead there and pull tight. and then come up around the component and up through that bead. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and give that some tension. I'm going to pull on it and help those kind of sit next to each other. And there we go. That's how it ended up working out on this one. And again, if it helps you to stitch through your loop here at the top, that's going to work great too. You have a lot of flexibility to adjust the way your beads fit. So don't be afraid to try all of that. And I'm going to get out some size 8 beads now. So these are just some opaque turquoise. Really nice, easy to see color here. And we're going to brick stitch in this direction. And one of the cool things about what I did with the tail thread, remember earlier in the beginning, we poked the tail thread through here and it's been hanging out loose. It's been getting in the way. When we do our next brick stitch, it's going to lock that thread down. So we're kind of shortcutting our weaving in process already for our tail. And you want to pick up 2 seed beads and then needle under. It's easier for me to stitch in this direction if I'm holding it so that I'm stitching to the right. Needle under the second thread bridge and then come up through the second bead. And what you'll see is they'll sit side by side, but that first one might kind of sit up like this. When we join it, it won't do that anymore. But for now, they might be a little bit wonky. And this is where you kind of got to feel out the connections. Let me show you in, like, what thread bridge do I go under is the real question. And what you're going to find is it's going to be different based on where you are and how big your beads are. And you're just going to, you'll know. So when you look at your design and you put your next bead on, you'll see, hey, I've got a lot of space here before my next thread bridge. I could go through the next one, but it's going to really be a lot of space. And my bead is less, it's not that wide, right? So if your jump to your next thread bridge is wider than your bead, maybe go into the one before it, even if there's not a lot of room there, even if it's just kind of hanging out, right? So what'll happen when you do that is 2 really great things. One is you won't have a gap, you won't have arcing of the beads, and it'll also straighten out the first one, the one before it. And it's really hard to teach when to know that. I do tend to go by that rule of like, how wide is my bead and how big is my jump? And if that jump is wider than my bead, I try to move back 1 thread bridge with my next bead. So let's just talk it through the whole way around so you can kind of catch the logic as we go. So my next thread bridge here, and here's my bead, that's going to be great. It's about the same width. So I'm going to go under just the next thread bridge. So I'll pull that and come up. And again, I'm just coming up through that 1 bead that we added. I'm going to get a new one. And again, same as before, it looks like the next thread bridge is the winner. And pull tight. Same thing again. Looks like the next one seems to be the right spot. And you'll know because they'll all sit nice and flat like that. And if they're ever not, you can take the stitch out and fix it by going through a different thread bridge and seeing if that looks better. So far, so good with just going into the next one. Go a little faster. And here we are with another decision point here. All right, so let's look at it. I still think the next one's the best, but see, I've got some space here and it's iffy, but it's not as much. So let's see, I'm gonna go through the next one. Come up through that one. And you know, when you tighten it, the place where it locks in adjusts to be closer to the bead when you pull tight. And that can sometimes help. It may not look as good until you tighten. Now here we go with another little spot where, all right, so that's a big jump. That's a jump that's a little bit too wide. So I'm going to go through this one. And so there's not a lot of space there, but watch what happens, because you see this one's starting to bow upward just a little bit. It didn't sit as flat as the last one did. So go into that same one. So it's the same thread bridge we put our last bead in, right? Pop, it pops it right back. So that's how when you see on like Instagram and stuff, those perfectly round like stitches that people get, they're just playing with the placement, right? They're playing with like what thread bridge is perfect for this particular, you know, bead size. And it makes up for any guesswork and variation. And you can just go around and around. And if you don't like it, you pull it out. But for the most part, once you get that kind of, you know, idea in your head that how wide is my jump? Is it wider than my bead? That's going to bow your bead. It's going to make it kind of sit in like with a slant in one direction or the other.
Danielle, it's
Yeah.
Carmi. Just a quick little request. When
Sure.
you do the next bead and the thread bridge, will you do a little bigger close-up?
Sure, yeah. Here's my grab one's a little taller. All right, and so when we did our round one, you see how like over here, there's each of these beads is joined on the top by a thread that's jumping. It's jumping over from one bead to the next and around the component and up and over. So that's where we're putting our new bead. We're going under that thread bridge right there. So there's my thread exiting from my last bead. And here's the new bead that we got, the size 8. And we're going under that little thread bridge right there. And when you pull that through, the bead just kind of pops like right there. It's a really neat look. Like it does that automatically. And then you just come back up through the bottom of that bead. And then it just stays right there. So I'm just going to keep going around, just trying to feel out which thread bridge is right. That's the only part of work stitch that is even remotely tricky. And the cool thing is it actually still works, even if you make a big jump with a bead, it's actually still going to work. It just, you'll have a little bit of a kind of the beads won't sit in plane. They'll just kind of be, one might have a little wobble to it. But you still get the color working out and it still looks really nice. So it's kind of a win no matter what you do. All right, I'm going to come underneath to another little decision spot. Let's see how we're doing. Yeah, so if I go to the next thread bridge, it's going to be a big jump. It's almost a little smidge wider than my beads. So we're going to go through the old one. So you see I'm going through the thread bridge the same thread bridge my last bead was in. And how I knew that was, it was just such a big jump to the next one that I thought that was better. And this one should be pretty comfortably in. This really is the next one because remember we put the last one in the one before it. So that's the next thread bridge there. Next one. Okay, I think we're going to get 2 more in there. What do you think? And then we'll be good. So let's go ahead and go to, let's see, this one. And so I get asked a lot, well, what happens if it's too small for another bead, but not quite close enough to join them? A couple things you can do if that happens to you is you can size down to like a size 10 seed bead. If you're using 8s, you could size down, like say this was too small for another 8. You could just put a 10 in there. And that actually looks really cool. And it does not detract from your design, especially if you match the color. The eye is going to follow the lines of the color and not necessarily jump out at a difference in bead size. And the bicones we add in the next round, they're a really cool way to even out that height. So you'll have a little bit of height differential, but their thread bridge, you'll cover it up, right? So it's something to keep in mind. Don't be afraid to swap a bead size if you need to. But that worked out pretty well. And now I get a chance to fix my first wonky bead. Because yeah, he's like, and I need to join it. So that was my last brick stitch bead. And I'm coming down through the first one. This is the one we added when we first started this row. It was the very first bead. So go down through that bead. Oops, sorry about that. I want to go down through that bead. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to get it to straighten out. And so what I'm thinking is it should do that when I pull tight. And it did. But if you're ever having trouble getting that first bead to stay where you want it, whatever direction it's leaning towards, go through the opposite thread bridge and it'll pull it back down. So in this case, it doesn't really matter. Mine's doing pretty good on its own, but I'm going to go through the first thread bridge here. And when I say going through it, I'm just going under it. It's a lot harder to see it when you've got it covered up with beads. But if you just go in between your purple beads, right, and pull up from the back, it catches your thread bridge automatically without you having to really be able to needle under it, because it's very hard to see under it once you've got beads on top, right? So you just needle under by going in between your 2 beads in the first row. And now I've caught it. And I'm coming back up through that same bead. And that's join. And so I do have an illustration of that I was just going to show really quick in case that helps anyone. That's the next one, but yeah, so it's going down through the first one and then you just pop up by picking that thread bridge up there. And I just want to double check and make sure I didn't lose anyone on that, because I can go back out and do it over again. I'll give it just a second in case anyone has questions about that. It's the same thing we did in, oh, actually, now I remember where I showed it. It's the same thing we did here. It's just instead of the component, we used thread bridge to needle under. And then this one we wrapped around the component an extra time. So that's just the join where you just come down through the first bead, under the thread bridge and back up. All right, and we're going to do that again with the next round with the crystals. So now we got to get our crystals out. And I found that I was able to make a pair of earrings, which is one of these strands. But if you're using different components, you might need more. So like for this one was really crystal hungry. This one used a lot. So one of the reasons I thought, well, take it down and do that. Makes it a little less crystal intense, but it's going to work regardless. So you can just get an extra strand or something, mix up colors if you have an extra color. So for this round, you want to pick up one of the 4mm bicones and then pick up one of your size 8 seed beads. And what we're going to do is we're going to build this around. We're going to put an alternating row of alternating crystal and seed bead. Okay, and so you're definitely going to want to skip the first thread bridge here and go under the second one. And that should be a good amount of spacing. You can work with a different size crystal. And that was another thought that I had about the big hoop, was what if I went up to the 6mm instead of 4mm bicone? That might actually make that space smaller and the stitch will still work. So if anyone experiments with that, please share a photo with me because I like to see it. I haven't gotten a chance to try it myself yet, but in theory, I believe it would actually work really nicely. But so what I did is I picked up the size 8 seed bead, sorry, and the 4mm crystal, and I went under the second thread bridge. Then it came back up through the crystal. And now I've got an 8/0 seed bead, and I'm going to go under the next thread bridge. Pull that through, and then just come up through that size 8 seed bead. And so our goal here is to have the opening of that bead sort of facing the center. We don't want the bead to be on its side because we're going to use that opening, the ability to go down through that hole later when we add our next round. And the reason I mentioned that is the stitch will actually still work if you added the bead sideways. It's just we really want it to not do that. So in order to keep it facing up, I might need to experiment with my thread bridge placement. So that was the second thread bridge. I want to go through the first one here. So when you pull through, just take a look at how your bead is sitting. And if the whole position is pointing kind of toward the center, then you've got it. Come through that one. Okay, now I need another seed bead. Making sure that I'm working from the back of my component here, just for my own ease, so I know where to put things. And I think my next thread bridge is going to be this one. How's that look? That's looking good. So I'm gonna stick with that one. But again, you'll have to experiment. You'll just have to see, like, does that look good? Does it not look good? And if it doesn't, you just pull it out and then just look at how it looks and put it back through another thread bridge and see if that works. I'll just kind of trial and error. Let's try this next one here. Looks good. Seed bead. Next thread bridge here. Up through that bead. And there it's going. So that's all we really need to do is just kind of add the bead, kind of feel it out, see where it needs to go in order so that the top of the crystal is kind of facing the center. All right. One more crystal. So far for me, this is kind of consistently working out where like my crystal's going into the next one and my seed bead's going into the one after that. It's working out really nicely. Yeah. Almost to the end. Just gonna keep going. And so in each of these cases, it's working out pretty nice to go through the next one. One thing that you'll notice when you're new to brick stitch and you're starting to kind of try to feel out which thread bridge is right, one way to tell if it's not where you might want to put it is if you turn it sideways like this and you look. If you see any wonky like wobble where one bead's up here and one bead's down there, you know you're packing them too tight. And in a design like this, I always tell people, if you aren't sure, go with too much space versus not enough space. Because not enough space, the next row covers up that excess gap of thread you might see above, you know, the two beads that are spaced too far. But bunching stands out a lot more to the eye than that little space fall. So if you aren't sure and you're kind of torn about it, just go with more space. We're almost there. And get this one here. And I'm going to have room for just one more crystal. Maybe. Ooh, okay, you guys are going to watch me troubleshoot something. So that's not enough space for a crystal, but I really do need it to have a crystal in between each one. So I'm going to go back. Go back through this. And this just happens sometimes. It's brick stitch life. And what I'm doing is I'm undoing, I'm carefully, I'm trying really hard not to pierce my thread as I go back, traveling back out, going under that thread bridge area. So from here, trying to see where I gave it too much space and I can liberate a little. Let's do this. Let's share this thread bridge with my crystal. Normally I would jump to the next one, but I need that space. So let's see what happens. Let's play with it. Sometimes you have to go back a few more beads even still, but I'm gonna see if I get lucky and this works. Yeah, okay, this is gonna be all right. All right, so does everyone see what I did there? I took out the last two beads and I moved each of those beads back one thread bridge. I've got some bunching here. I'm not loving it, but I'm going to slide it a little. All right. See, my flat plane is still there. It's not too bad. Yeah, we had to finesse that one. And there's just, that's going to happen, right? You're going to get variation. It's just how it works. But my crystal's going to fit now. It's a good, perfect little spot for it right there.
Danielle, I wanted to let you know everyone's really enjoying you troubleshooting.
I hope so. Yeah, I always see those as opportunities now because you guys are so nice. No one ever, it's like, oh no, it didn't work. You guys know how it is with beads. Sometimes it works and sometimes you just have to. So yeah, that looks like way better. So that worked out. And all I did to make it work was I went and took out my last two beads and then I just put them back one thread bridge each. And that bought me just enough space. And then because this one was a little bit bunchy after I did that, you know, they can still move. So they're just, this bead, the thread that ran through it, all it's doing over here is it's hugging the thread that's running over these two beads. And you can slide it. You can push on it, and you can slide it, and you can push on that one and slide it. So there's always room for it to wiggle and get back in place and do good. So that's all I did there to make that work out. And now it looks great. So I'm exiting from this crystal, right? From the last crystal I added, and I want to join it. Sometimes, like for example, on a lot of these designs, you might end with a size 8 seed bead and you might end with a crystal, but no matter which one you end with, you still want to join it to the first one, whichever bead that is. So going down through the first bead, all the way down with that thread. And then again, I need to pick up the thread bridge that's under that turquoise seed bead. So to do that, I'm going to go in between the beads in the last row. So stitching down through those, and then see here on the other side, it's kind of down there between them. Pull up, and you'll have caught that thread bridge that's under that bead. And then I just need to come out through that bead. Oh, that's sparkle. So pretty. Okay, so now there's that row joined. And you could end there if you wanted to. I mean, that looks so pretty right there, even just like that. I'm loving it. But I added another round of crystals because I found that it was kind of a perfect fit in between each of these. And it worked even when the fit was a different, you know, roundness shape. And I'll explain what those little beads are as I get to it. But what I'm doing now is I'm going to pick up, well, first I need to make sure I'm exiting from one of the bicones. Right now I'm exiting from one of the size 8 seed beads, and you may find yourself here with me, or you may find that you're exiting from a bicone. If you're already at a bicone, great, hang tight. If not, just go down through your next bicone. And then do that same trick again, where we're going to go through 2 beads below. See, I'm just going in between them because I can't see my thread bridge anymore, and I want to pick up the thread bridge that's above them. So I'm just going down through those, right? And here at the back, you see what happens if I pull it up. Boom, I got my thread bridge there. So you don't need to be able to see it to catch it. Now come up through that crystal. I'm being gentle because I don't want to crack my crystal. There we go. Okay. So now I'm in position, exiting from one of the bicones, and I'm going to pick up one more. And you could change the color here. That would be cool. I'm just going with the blue because that's what's out, but go down through the next bicone bead. So I'm jumping out from this one, and I just want to go down through the next one. And the cool thing that happens there is that little bead is just going to pop in and sit sideways like that. And I just thought that looked neat, so I went with that. And again, I'm going to go between those 2 beads so that I can catch my thread bridge and pop up. Come up through my crystal. Get another crystal. Come down. It's really fun the way they just pop like that. And so these are definitely sitting where their holes are joined in a ring. When we go all the way around, you'll see. So we're going to lose that little star shape, but we're replacing it with like almost like a matrixed look. And what I did there is I had a visible thread bridge there. So I just picked that one up. Went under it. If you're having trouble getting through your crystals like I am, try this. Try poking your needle down through the size 8 seed bead and then turning it, coming up that way. So here's the next crystal. Down to the next one. It's pretty cool. And then I'm going to go in between those beads. Pull up. Got that thread bridge. And then up through my crystal. And so the spacing with this particular component worked out great with no beads in between them. And what I mean by that, I'll show you when I get to the end here, is that after I complete this, it just looks done, right? It doesn't look like there's any spaces or like it needs another row, but you might feel differently with your component or with the beads you chose. And there's always options for that. So I'll show that in just a second here. And go up through here. Just going to go all the way around. And they're staying pretty flat. What I'm doing here when I find these thread bridges underneath my crystals is I'm kind of adjusting the position of the bead by maybe using a different one. And what I mean by that is, say like I originally stitched it into the one that's to the left, and maybe I go through the one that's below it to the right. It centers the bead. And in that case, I actually missed the thread bridge, so that didn't even work at all. Go back down there. Okay, so let's see. Go under that one, see what happens. There we go, that was a little better, I feel like. We've got just 3 more to go, and then we're done with this earring. And I'll show you the other ideas again. Let's get down through here. Don't worry, that was not a broken crystal. That was just my wrist popping for some reason. Why did it do that? I don't know. The weirdest thing. Okay, so down through this next crystal here. Under that thread bridge by going in between those beads. My tail is just starting to get in the way. Okay, last crystal. We are there. Okay, so from here, we got room for just one more. Pick up one more crystal. And we're gonna go back down to the first bicone. This is the one that we exited from when we started adding this row. So we're back down through it. So there's our join. And there's the earring all done. And all we have left to do is get rid of our thread, excess thread. So what you can do is you can start weaving in from here, or you can just do one more grab with the thread bridge under there and come back up through that crystal again. Kind of officially ending that join. And the reason I want to show that is because from here, what you could do is you could go through all your crystals in the ring. So I'm exiting from this one right here, and I could turn and go back through these crystals, and I could go and reinforce them all in a circle. See how I can go through each one? And just keep going around. Well, that's how it worked out with this component, where theirs are so connected and so close that, but see, there's just a smidgen of space there, but not too much. Now, what happened when I did the same thing on the 2-inch round? On the 2-inch round, I had a much wider gap in between my crystals. So, and that round 4, where we were doing that sideway crystal add, there was a lot of space in between them, and I was able to get a size 11 seed bead in there. So what I'm doing here, showing here, is just kind of, you see how I'm going around into the next crystal, the next crystal. I did that here, but on every one I put a little size 11. And that was optional. And it actually still looked really cool, even if I didn't do that. So you can experiment with putting more beads. And then of course, the other idea that I was sharing earlier is, with a larger hoop, why not go up to a 6mm crystal and see what happens with that? So all of those things can be tried and could make a component work. And then last but not least, if you wanted to just do a turn, so instead of going all the way around and joining it, you could just, when you get to the end of this row, just come up and then just start adding 2 seed beads, and just go back through in this direction and come up and do the next round in this direction. It works out great just like that. And in this case, I left those gaps. You see, you could probably put a size 11 seed bead in between there if you wanted, but I wanted to show the gaps about what they looked like before I did that. See, you could totally put a seed bead in between there if you wanted to, but I actually thought it looked cool just like that, so I left it. And then you can see what the yellow crystals look like with these colors that I have out here versus the blue. So that's it in a nutshell. I know we covered a lot of different kinds of, tips, tricks, techniques, but there is a replay available of, we did a lot of stuff in an hour. So
Danielle?
Yeah.
I made one promise on your behalf.
Okay.
Do you have an extra finding?
I do. I have a ton of them right here.
The most important part of this is the first 3 beads.
Yeah.
Will you just demonstrate that? because once you get going, you can keep going. But if you would just show
Sure.
them the first three,
Do you want to see it on which one?
I'll put it on today's finding.
Today's finding? Okay. All right. And so, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and trim the thread I have over here so you guys don't have to watch me thread needle again. Because this one's ready to go. And I actually feel good about how I weaved that in already too. So I'm going to put that over there. And so of course you'd have a much longer strand than I do here, but you'd go ahead and thread your needle, fold it over, and then just put your needle out of the way for a minute. We're going to work with the other end of your thread. And you want to get your component and then go ahead and go through it with your tail thread, leaving about 5 inches or so of a tail. You don't need much. Don't worry about where it is in the component right now. Just go ahead and tie that double shoelace knot. So let's get that shoelace knot on there. There's one. And two. Get that knot tied. And then grabbing the tail and working thread, I'm pulling them in so that the knot is sitting kind of toward the inside of my component. If you were stitching on the outside, you'd pull it to the outside, but we're trying to make our beads sit on the inside. And I moved it up to sit next to my top hoop, which is completely optional. Because this is a perfectly round shape, you could work it around from any position on the component. So it doesn't really matter. I'm just habit forming, putting it toward the top. Pick up one bead and bring that down. Go ahead and bring that tail. So this is the tail thread, and I just brought the tail thread through the bead. It's easy to do with Wildfire because Wildfire is so stiff that you can kind of feed it through a bead this big, and that's all I did. Just gonna pull the working and tail thread apart. When you do that, it brings your knot into your bead, and you get a really nice tight connection there. So I'm gonna lay that down on the mat, and I'm gonna go ahead and get my needle, get another seed bead. And you can do this directly with crystals too. I mean, I started with seed beads as just my design choice, but crystal work too. Get your seed bead down there. And so now what you want to do is take your needle and go under the component. And then what I like to do is I like to push down on the component to keep my seed bead inside my ring. And it should sit right next to the one before it when you pull. I'm not pulling too tight, just kind of enough to make the bead sit where I want it. And then I'm going to come back up through that bead. And I'm coming back up through it from the same place where the thread's exiting. And then they sit side by side next to each other like that. And you just keep doing that around. Or alternatively, you could make a turn if you didn't want to join it. And in the last demo, we were showing joining for every one of those rings. But you could just, you know, make a small row like that. And that would work too. So there's no requirement to join it into a loop is what I mean. And there we go. It's hard getting started. Those first 3 beads, I mean, they're going to be kind of wonky and move around and do all that stuff. So I don't know if that answered the question or not, but
It did, Danielle.
Yeah.
Your student thanks you enormously. Thank
is there anything
you.
else while I've got this one out that anyone wants to see that I didn't demo?
No, that was the one question, Danielle, because they might have missed the first 30 seconds.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully without the recording, which will be available on Monday, a few people will be able to make it this weekend. And the recording should be on the site by about 1 o'clock Monday.
Yeah, and then of course I'm reachable if you have questions. You can find me on social medias, and I'm under Danielle Wickes Jewelry on like Instagram, direct messages, stuff like that. So you can find me there. What else? So we've got really so next week there's no class next week, and we did have some inspiration though that about this time 2 summers ago when we first started getting a chance to teach for Michael's, one of the very first projects I ever made were these raindrop earrings. And I put them on today and had this thought like, hey, why don't we share a link to that? And so earlier at the beginning of class, I dropped a link in the chat to the raindrop earrings, but you can find them just by Googling Michael's raindrop earrings, John Bead, and it'll come up. There's both an instruction download on Michael's website. And they also have a YouTube video that we did for him. So you can check that out. Another way to use it for seed beads over the next week. And then we'll be back the following week, but that's with one of our workshops. So we do, for Michael's, we do some 2-hour paid workshops, and they're, you can sign up, and it's a very small format class. It's usually about a dozen of us to 20 people at the most. And we spend 2 hours doing a deep dive on a more elaborate or like more complicated project. So it's a little bit more advanced bead weaving. And this one that we're doing is a pendant. So this is the sparkle pendant. It's the one over here. And it has the little eye. Like we're mainly going to focus on how to do this really beautiful stitching on the design, and then we'll put it together. And if you missed last week we made these crystal bracelets, and that replay is already on Michael's website. And then you're getting a sneak preview here of some of our classes that are coming up in July. We've got some brick stitch coming up, and we've got a ring coming up. This ring is really cool. I like it. A little fun design there. We'll do that one. And then of course the workshop for next month are these flower bracelets. So lots of stuff. This is the workshop in July. Check the website, michaels.com/classes to sign up for everything I just showed you. And I want to wish you guys happy beading and a creative weekend and a creative week ahead. And I'll see you next time. Okay. Thanks. Bye guys.